sports, your performance is everything. So what happens when our minds end up impacting our performance? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Mindful Sports Podcast. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Mindful Sports. Today I wanted to shift the topic a little more towards specifically youth athletes. This topic was touched on in a written interview with Switchbacks FC midfielder Ronnie Argueta. But I also wanted to talk a little bit more about it. You see, kids will be kids, but oftentimes we as adults forget what it is to struggle as kids. Some kids have friends and family and situations that come and go. Maybe they come from a family with a constant moving job, such as those in the military. Other kids grow up in the same town where they were born and experience the same old. They know everybody. They've known them all since they were kids. They can tell you anything about anyone. And yet one day, their friends are not their friends anymore. Maybe because they drifted apart and enjoy different aspects of life. Maybe somebody left for a better job somewhere else or going to school somewhere else. Whether it is increasing schoolwork, the body and hormonal changes that kids go through, or even critical life events such as parents divorcing or the passing of a close family member, coaches and those in sports administrative positions have to remember that these kids must deal with the impact of those situations mentally as well. Not every kid is going to handle all of those the same. I grew up in a military family, and I was used to moving every 2 or 3 years, but even I did not handle every move exactly the same. On top of all of the expectations and challenges that kids go through just on a normal everyday basis, we then throw the stress of sports on top of them. Even the reasons for these kids joining sports are different. Some may choose to do sports because it's what they love. A few may end up in sports because there's just not many options of other things for them to do. Still others are pushed into it by their parents. Coaches and sports administrators cannot be responsible for these decisions or the reasons why a child might be in sports. But ultimately, they have to deal with the consequences. There are a couple main schools of thought. And the first is that kids should pick up a specialization early on. If you want to be a soccer star, then you have to start young. If you're going to be the faster track star or the best wrestler, then you need to start training early. The second thought is that kids will naturally grow into a specific sport as they get older and more competitive. The second thought believes that participating in multiple different sports will give you a better foundation later on. Both of these schools of thoughts have their merits, yet they are both intrinsically focused on the physical performance of the athlete. However, each of these ignores the emotional and mental developments that children go through growing up as well. In our interview, Mr. Argueta stated that we wanted to introduce the kids into sports psychology later after they had fallen in love with sports and developed some of the skills. His reasoning behind this was to avoid putting unnecessary stress on youth athletes. I absolutely agree with him that athletes do not need to be introduced into actual psychology principles too early. Their introduction to these should take place across many years at age-appropriate levels. It's gonna look very different for each kid as they all grow and mature at different rates. It's because of this that it is even more crucial for youth coaches and sports administrators to understand the importance of sports psychology and how to introduce and teach it to young athletes. Youth coaches who run sports programs, whether it is recreational, competitive, or school teams, need to learn how to help young athletes understand and learn these principles in a way that connects to the athletes and does not put needless pressure on them. Telling a kid that they just need to grow up and handle it misses an opportunity to teach them how to handle the added pressure. Creating an open and communicative environment can help to reduce the stigma by seeking help when they are struggling mentally. Younger kids need help to learn how to fail forward and not be deterred when they mess up. This is going to help make them more resilient as they get older. And these are not skills or knowledge that you need to drill into them, but helping them talk through what's bothering them, guiding them to solutions, are ways that coaches can help use sports psychology principles in allowing their athletes to grow and become stronger mentally without directly introducing these principles. And after this short break, come back and talk a little bit more about this. Welcome back, everyone. So I wanted to pick up where we left off about talking with coaches and sports administrators on how to help these kids in learning these principles for sports psychology. I was recently asked what age I thought that it would be appropriate to introduce sports psychology principles. For me, that's a little bit of a difficult question because I think that you're going to introduce them very early on. However, we're not going to introduce them in a formal way. When you think about a little kid and how we try and encourage them and help them and show them ways that they can do it, we're using very basic psychology principles without actually formally implementing them. I use my daughter as an example. When she was 4 years old, she had already had this nature of wanting to be the best and this drive to be better. And so when we had her in her youth soccer, the coaches never did anything wrong, but she would mess up, and the entire 30-minute drive home, I would hear about it. And so it was, how do we get her to overcome this failure mentality of I screwed up and I can't do this and I'm not good enough, and turn it into something positive? For her, that was showing her other times where she had failed or struggled with something that she didn't know how to do, and be very specific about it, and now be specific in showing her instances where she has succeeded in them, to help her make the connection between, oh, I wasn't good at that, but I kept trying and I got better. This is a principle that you would use in psychology, but we're not formally introducing this. We're just using it in a natural way that comes to help her understand. And there are many ways that you can do this with kids. We use visualization techniques with them all the time. We sit here and say, okay, now imagine that this guy is coming to do this, and you have to get here. How are you going to do that? And we allow them to create that visual image with their imagination and help guide them to those solutions and have them create plans on their own This is something that we do with older athletes too, but we go much more in depth with it. So we can see these principles get used every day. However, formally introducing it, I do not believe should come until later. For me, this would come around the time that the youth athlete is starting high school. Right around that age is where we would start formally introducing them, because I like to use a long-term development model for athletes. And they go from training to train, which is where you really start incorporating competition, to training to compete, which is you're really doing this, and this is something that you are pursuing at a high level. It's right around the start of high school where they start to transition between these two phases, and that is where I believe we can start introducing psychology formally to athletes and really spelling out the techniques that we've probably been using for quite some time. And so therefore, it is crucial that coaches and sports administrators attempt to have a playbook where they can introduce different sports psychology techniques to help their athletes grow. It could be incorporated into your coaching philosophy or motto. For the coaches of older and more competitive athletes, it might look like creating your training program through a holistic lens, where some days are focused more on the mental aspect and not as much techniques. For sports administrators, this can simply look like implementing policies within your program or organization that foster a more welcoming environment to student athletes and the added struggles and pressures that they feel. This might also mean finding a way to connect and include parents more. Passing these techniques along to parents could add another resource for a child where they are exposed to these things more and therefore make it more of a normal part of their life. Something that really becomes ingrained in them that they can use as they get older. In the end, any coach or sports administrator who works with youth athletes needs to be prepared to truly take care of their athletes. No, you are not the parents. No, you are not the end-all authority for a child. But the impact that a coach makes, for good or bad, is often remembered by their athletes for years to come. Do you want to be someone who leaves a disgusting taste in your athlete's mind? Or are you a coach who simply was an alright coach? Or would you rather be the coach that an athlete remembers as someone who made a difference in their life, who helped them become not just a better athlete, but a better person as well? When you listen to an interview that Steve Kerr did, talking about all of the great coaches that he played with, a big point that he made was that all of those coaches, and the reason that they were so impactful on him, was because they had a large focus on the relationship and the person of the athlete and not just the performance. So take this, think about it, think about how we can help protect our youth and grow our youth in a way that helps them and gives them a foundation for real mental strength as they grow up and pursue sports at a level that will be even more challenging. I hope you guys have a great day, and please make sure to give this episode a like, share this with your friends and family, and leave us a comment or review. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date, and have a great day.